everyone, I'm Addie, and today we're going to talk about how to find the right therapist for your child. Okay, so let's get to it. So you want to think about logistics first. Can you get to appointments at certain times? So you want to find a provider that's in your area and a provider that has time slots that you need for your child. There are telehealth options in some areas. If you're unable to drive to appointments, that is an okay option. It is not my personal preference for children unless there's already an established relationship with the child. So it is my personal preference to have the child in person. I just think there's especially with kids, there's a lot more value to being in person. So when we decide our child needs a therapist, now what? The first step I would take is to ask trusted friends. If they have a child therapist that they already like, I would start there, right? If you trust your friends and you trust their judgment, then that's probably a good place to start. If you don't have anybody that fits that criteria, I would start with the school counselor. If your child is having issues, it's always good for a school counselor to know about them anyway, just so they can keep an eye out while you're not there, while they're in school. The school counselor should have plenty of referrals and might have any personal connections that they may be able to refer you. And then I would go to your pediatrician. So it's always a good idea for certain issues like anxiety and depression to get a full physical done, just to rule out any medical issues. Your pediatrician will also have a lot of resources. They'll probably print out a list and hand you the list, and you can go from there. If you don't have those referral sources, there's a website I use called psychologytoday.com. And it's great because you can filter for your zip code, for specialty, for the issue that you're having. And what's great about this is there's a picture of the therapist. Sometimes there's a picture of their room, which is great to show your child, especially if they're anxious about the first appointment, which many people are. You can say, okay, this is what the counselor looks like, and this is what their office looks like. It helps kids and adults too, but it helps kids kind of know a little bit more what to expect, because sometimes when we're anxious, we get these pictures in our head of something scary. So that really helps, I think. If that Psychology Today, for some reason, doesn't produce any results, you can contact your insurance provider and they can email you a huge list of providers. That is a little bit more difficult to do because some of the providers they're not always up to date, and they don't have usually the specialty listed on the insurance. So I would start with the other options first and then check and see if they have insurance. Okay, so once you find a provider, you make a phone call and they will briefly discuss with you what issues your child is having and make sure that they are able to provide those services. So if your child is grieving, you want someone who is knowledgeable in grief. Trauma, same thing, anxiety, depression. You want to make sure that the clinician is properly trained in those areas. So what makes a good child therapist? So these are my personal opinions. There are many ways to do therapy and I do not know all of the great ways. This is just my opinion on what makes a good child therapist. Okay, so first thing is I think that they should do the initial session with just the parent. This is my preference because in that first session, we're getting a lot of family history, we're getting child's developmental history, the issues that are going on today. So if the child is present in this session, and I've had this happen before I knew to not include your child in the first session, the parents will either filter themselves and not give the whole truth to protect the child, or should filter themselves and give too much information that maybe the child is too young to understand. So I always like to do that first, and that first session is just all information anyway. If the child is a teenager, they can generally be included. I don't see that that's a problem. Usually after 12, 13, 14. It's kind of a judgment call on what the issue is, I believe. So once you meet for the first appointment, I would ask how they engage your child. Talk therapy is not the best for young children. We do include talk therapy, but we also include creativity and play. I think that is the best way to get kids to open up. I have heard of clinicians doing just talk therapy, asking the child about their week, but I don't see that as productive. Again, there may be ways that works. I just haven't found them. So look around in the office and see if they have any games, art supplies, things that will kind of help open your child up. And I think that that's really important. It's also important that the therapist will include you in therapy. So what does that look like? That looks like maybe in the beginning of sessions, you come in and provide an update. That also means at the end of sessions, you can come in and you and the child can show the parent the new skills that they have learned, especially for younger children. So if they went through some deep breathing techniques, if they learned some coping skills on how to manage anger, you want them to journal and you need the parent to purchase a journal for them. You also want the parent to know what they're going to work on through the week, right? So if we say, okay, you're going to do your deep breathing exercises 3 times a day, you want the parent to know that so that they can, encourage their child and do it with them. So we don't want someone necessarily who's just going to not help us help our children. That being said, a good therapist will give your child right to privacy. So I always go over this in the first session. I say, what you say in this room stays in this room unless there is anything of danger, right? You're going to hurt yourself, someone else, anything concerning. I always say that I will discuss with the parents. But for little kids, usually they're more open to you talking in front of them about what's going on. For teenagers, it's really, really important to have that level of privacy, because if they think that you are going to call their parents in and tell them word for word what they are saying, they are not going to talk. So you need someone that will give them privacy, and you have, as a parent, you have to respect that and not expect the therapist to tell you what they said. You can't call them and say, what did they say in session today, right? Just as you wouldn't read their diary, hopefully, right? So teenagers and children all deserve privacy. And that depends on the age, what level, how much privacy you're going to give them. But I tell all kids, and a good therapist will kind of ask permission and say, can we talk to mom about this, right? Unless, of course, there's a dangerous situation. So I think that that's all of the things I can think of for what a good child therapist is and how to find one. Some more advice. If your child is in therapy for a little while and starts to do better, do not stop therapy, please. Sometimes what happens is, the child is doing better and we say, okay, you're fine. Come on, let's come out. What I would do is, if you're going every week, talk to the therapist about, okay, let's go every other week and see how that goes. And then once that's going well, go maybe once a month for a little while. You want your child to continue to have that support, but also continue to build their skills, because these are good for every child, right? Learning about our emotions and how to cope with them, regulating our emotions. So these are all skills that I think every kid needs anyway. So if you can afford it, and if it is an option, I would keep them in for a little bit longer. Talk to the therapist, of course, to see if it's appropriate. That way you can continue to build the children's resilience. So I hope that helps give some guidance on how to find the right therapist for your child. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments below, or any other ideas, leave them below, and I will update it in future videos. If you want to do a how to find the right therapist for adults, let me know, because that is kind of a different process, right? Different trainings, different types of therapists, and things like that. So, all right, thanks guys, bye.